careful what you say behind the scenes. So I will be recording all the classes and posting those on Friday. So if you're absent, whether you're traveling or sick, it's mostly to very much so encourage people who aren't feeling well. Just please stay home. Like, we don't have to worry about all this if people who don't feel well will just stay home, right? If we've learned anything from all this, it's that if you're sick, the world doesn't stop if you just stay home. But if you don't stay home, then they'll make the world stop. So I'm going to start with devotions, if I can find my phone. Here it is. I like to start with devotions every class period. But I like this proverb to start the year with. It comes from Proverbs chapter 1, and it says, verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline." And the reason I like that is we can know a lot and not be wise. Because wisdom is not just knowing something, but also applying it to your life. Like, you can know right from wrong and still choose to do wrong because you're not very wise about it. You can know things and not submit them to God's authority and still make really bad life choices. So there's a difference between knowing stuff and being smart and being wise. And we are called not just to be knowledgeable, but also to be wise. And that comes from positioning ourselves in the proper place under God, under the authority of His Scripture, recognizing that He is holy and perfect, and we are not. And He is worthy of our submission. He is worthy of our obedience in all things, including what we learn. So as we go about this year, we learn our anatomy. We'll be doing so with that in mind. And we'll be doing it from a biblical perspective and giving credit where it's due and marveling at His masterpiece in us, His creation. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day that you blessed us with. We thank you so much for the fact that we are able to get together, Lord, to learn, and we could be in person. Regardless how different that looks from previous years, we just are learning to be grateful for things that we took for granted. And that's one important lesson that I think we've all learned during this season. I pray that you give us both wisdom and understanding as we go about learning this year, and that we would work hard and we would work diligently, and we would do so unto you. Bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen. So this is anatomy and physiology, and every one of you were on my list, so you're in the right spot. And this is a great class. This is a great class, guys. You're in for just a great year. There's so much awesome stuff to learn about the human body. And as we go deeper and all the layers unfold, it's just, it's amazing. So just a tiny bit about me. I studied at Cornerstone University because I learned a little bit about all you in your assignments that you post on the Google Classroom. I studied at Cornerstone University, environmental biology, chemistry minor. I am married, and I have a little boy, Anthony. He's 17 months, so not quite a year and a half. He's romping around and talking, working on talking anyway, and so cute. I love science. I really love science, and I love teaching science, and I hope that comes through this year as I'm teaching you. I love what I do. And I hope that is evident. I did not think this is what I would be doing. This is not what I had planned, but God is good, and He directed my paths, and I couldn't imagine doing something else now. So there were some papers at your spot. We're going to go through those from the top down, starting by going over the Constitution. This is the second edition textbook. There is a first edition that has like a purple cover. If that's the one that you have, it's fine. It also is very close to this one. There's just a few things that were updated in this one, which you really won't miss out on much if you do have the first edition. But it is the anatomy and physiology book, the advanced biology. I've had some people have the biology book before, not this one, so I just thought I would showcase it. Does anyone not have a book?
This week.
Oh, yes. I was like, I knew I brought one for someone to borrow, but I couldn't remember who it was. Okay, everyone else has a book? Okay, good, because that's the only one I brought, so. I do have another one at home, though. So we're going to go through this Constitution just so we kind of lay some groundwork of expectations from you, from me, from your parents for the year. This is kind of one of your pieces of homework is having your parents read this so that they understand what I'm expecting from you and from them. And you get 10 points if you bring it to class next week signed. So that's an easy 10 points. So have them read it and sign it. First and foremost, be prepared. Bring a pencil, bring paper. Homework, you're not going to have as much to bring to class because we're going to be turning that in electronically in the Google Classroom. There'll be the occasional thing that you'll be turning in class, but I can't really think of something right now off the top of my head that this class will be turning in. Yes? The Constitution? Does anyone else not have it back there? Did you get one? You didn't get one. Am I one short? Does anyone have 2 Constitutions? Can you look quickly? Because I printed 24. Well, can you just look on and I can get you. You're in physics next, too, right? It's pretty much the same thing. So, okay. Late homework. Oh, you don't have to bring your textbook. In fact, we won't really use the textbook except for one week in class. So it's heavy and you just, unless if you're going to be doing homework during study hall or something, you don't need to bring it with you every week. Homework. It's expected to be turned in by midnight the day that it's due. So this week, you're going to be assigned stuff as of today. There's homework you're assigned. Next week, it is due next Thursday by midnight in the Google Classroom. So tomorrow, I will be updating the Google Classroom with the video of this class. And then it will also have a place at that point for you to turn in all of your different assignments. And I'll be doing that on Fridays. That'll kind of be my Friday work that I plan on doing from home because I really don't anticipate anyone like racing home, getting all of their anatomy homework done and wanting to turn it in tonight. Maybe someone will do that, but you're super ambitious if that's the case. So you can expect that it will be there by Friday for you to start to be able to turn stuff in as you get it done. Tomorrow, I don't have any idea how long it's going to take for these videos to like upload and stuff. So my plan is to have it by end of the day tomorrow. Maybe it'll be in the afternoon, but I'll know a little bit better after I've actually gone through the process all one time. So I'll show you a little grace this week. You show me a little grace this week. It all works out. So late homework, I'll let a parent know if you start turning homework in late. I won't really worry about it if one assignment's late, but if it starts to become like multiple things, then I'll send an email out. The nice thing also is that your parents can check your classroom at any time to see your grade and to check up on whether or not you're turning your homework in. So it's a little bit different even than previous years where I was just keeping track of all of that. They didn't really have any idea. They technically can get on and look anytime they want. So there's more transparency there. Also new this year, I will be taking points off for late homework. So every day you turn it in late, a point will be taken off, which doesn't seem like a lot unless the assignment's only worth 10 points. Then it becomes troublesome very quickly because even if you get everything right on it, if it's 2 days late, then that's like 80% just because it was late. Unless there's a reason, a specific reason. You were sick, something happened in your family, you were in the ER, you were traveling. Like, the key there with stuff that's late is communication. Because if you don't communicate, then I'm going to assume that it was just because maybe you were busy, but there's lots of things that can happen that we just don't prioritize things properly. Or we can just sometimes not care as much as we should. So communicate if homework is going to be late. 2, this is a big class. Okay, there's 24 of you. This is the largest class I've ever had. So I have an hour and a half of your time every week. Please give that to me. Please just give it to me. Just listen, take notes. Don't be on your cell phone. It's an hour and a half a week. I don't want to say you have the rest of the time because I don't know what else that you're involved in, but this is my hour and a half. And it's disrespectful to me and to your fellow students if you're being disruptive, if you're whispering, if you're on your phone, etc. Speaking of which, I have provided these baskets for cell phones. Now, we're going to just start the year with the hope that everyone keeps their phone in their backpack. But if it starts to become a thing, then everyone will have to put their phones in the baskets. So we're going to start with the precedence. It just stays in your backpack. And if it doesn't stay in the backpack, then everyone's going to have to put their phone. I updated my baskets, though. They're cuter than my ones from last year. I started using those for different things, so I had to go get other ones. Oh, it's amazing how plastic storage tubs just managed to get filled. 4, you want to keep your notes because your notes will help you study for your module tests and your notes will help you study for your midterm and your final. So every week you will have notes that I've created for you to fill the blanks in and write definitions, etc. They're like prompted notes and you'll want to keep track of those in a folder, in a binder, etc. They will be double hole punched or triple hole punched. Label your homework with your name, what the assignment is, and then specifically if you do have the first edition textbook, I should know that because some of the questions are a little bit different in that one. So if you have the purple one and not the white one, let me know. Like I said, it's not a problem, but there are some differences, and then that will help me grade your homework properly. 6, check the Google Classroom for additional assignments, videos, and homework help. Some weeks I'll post videos that I will require you to watch, like some YouTube stuff. Other weeks I might just post something that's I think is helpful, informational, and just is kind of there for your benefit if you want to understand something more. So I'll let you know if there's something that's required versus something that's just there for you if you want. And then 7 is more for your parents, reminding them to make sure that they're checking on your grades and you're missing homework regularly. Homework, there's 2 types of questions in Apologia textbooks. So they're called modules and not chapters. And within the module itself, there's what's called on your own questions. So you'll find those hidden inside of the chapter. I shouldn't say hidden, placed. It's not like you have to go searching for them. They're obvious, but they're within the chapter. And then there's study guide questions, which are at the end of the module. So that's where you'll find those. Now, the on your own questions, I grade credit, no credit, based on your completion, because the answers are also in your textbook. They're at the end of the module. So I'm sort of assuming that you're checking them yourself. Or if you're stuck on one, you're looking at the answer yourself. Because the answers are there. So if you do all of them, you get all the credit. If you do none of them, you get no credit. If you do a quarter of them, you get a quarter of the credit, etc. So based on completion, study guide questions will be graded for correction. So if they're worth 40 points, and you got, most of them right, but not all of them, then you might get 38 out of 40, etc. So those will be graded, and I'll mark the ones that are wrong and write in your correct answer. A lot of the time what I'll do for correcting is I'll leave a comment. Depending on if you have filled it out in the Google Doc or if you have just uploaded it. If it's done in a Google Doc, I can actually go right in and type in the correct answer in a different different color. But if you just uploaded it from your computer, then I'll leave a comment off to the side and say, these are the wrong. But it's usually not a problem. Everyone always gets everything right? Like, you don't even have to worry about it. Actually, Apology is very well written, and the questions are very, they're very well asked. And so most of the time, it's not a huge issue usually in homework that people get a lot of stuff wrong. Sometimes on tests, but not usually in the homework, I found historically in this class. Module tests are going to be assigned every other week, roughly, over the module that we are completing. Those are closed book, closed note, unless otherwise noted. There'll be a couple throughout the year that I'll have you take open book, but otherwise no notes, no textbook. And your options for taking those, because you will upload them to the classroom as well, you can take the hard copy test, but then my preference would be if you're handwriting on it, then scan it if you have access to a scanner. Otherwise, last resort, you can take a picture. Pictures just can be kind of temperamental sometimes. So I prefer for you to scan if you're handwriting. Otherwise, you can just type the answers and just do like question 1, 2B, if it's like a diagram where you're like B's pointing to the humerus bone, then you just write 2B, humerus, So that kind of thing, you can type those and also upload to the classroom that way. You don't actually have to have like the test when you turn it in. You can just turn in the answers. And last, if you're going to be gone, let me know. One of the things about the Google Classroom is that it takes some of the handouts that I would normally be giving, and I can put them on there. So there's less that I have to know about, like, oh, I need to get that to them. But specifically the notes, I will send you then the completed notes, like they have the blanks filled in already, so that you can keep those in your folder. And last, ask questions, call, email, text, anytime except the middle of the night. Text is going to get the fastest response, then email, possible. Yeah, people don't really call on the phone very often anymore. Usually it's text or email. So my phone number and email address are at the top of the Constitution and at the top of the syllabus. They're also on the PTC website. And then as your teacher, I will strive to bring excellence to the classroom and content, stuff that I hand out, stuff that is up here, and obviously things that I teach you. I will aim for clarity. That's my goal, and enthusiasm. It's literally my prayer this morning. Help me be clear and enthusiastic. And then I will have all your homework graded within 2 weeks. It's usually 1 week. Most of the time it's 1 week, but I do give myself that 2-week window just in case if life happens. But I don't like that because there's 24 of you, and every time I give you an assignment, I have 24 to grade, and it builds up really quickly. If I don't get to it 1 week, it's like, So I do strive for that, but it won't ever be more than 2 weeks. And then I will be fair and strive to be fair and give grace when grace is called for, and be strict when that is called for, and pray for discernment to know when which is called for. So, any questions on the Constitution? Okay. Then the next thing should be the syllabus. So I will, every time I update the classroom, I will also have your homework for the week posted there as well as here. But I wanted to give you a hard copy because A, I'll be updating that on Fridays, and I mean, you might start something on a Thursday evening, I don't know. So then you can look at this and see. And some people like paper still to be able to cross things out. I know I still like to cross things out with paper. This is gonna like have the muffled of me hitting the microphone a couple times. I like to still cross things out with on paper. So I will provide you with the hard copy of the syllabus. This is the first semester. Then January I'll give you the other half, so that you can track things that way as well. So today is week 1. Has the date, has the biblical principle. I don't always stick to the script for biblical principles. I have stuff written down for every week, but I tend to just share devotion from whatever it was I was personally doing devotions on that week and what God kind of placed on my heart, I feel. Then we have what the homework is. And homework is going to be pretty consistent, honestly, for this class. It's going to be module, reading, on your own questions, study guide questions, test every other week, and then you'll also have this disease journal assignment, which about every other week you'll be writing an article for that. So it's pretty consistent. After a couple weeks, you'll probably get into a groove and understand about how long it takes you every week to work on your anatomy homework. There's really not a lot of like curveballs I throw into the year that it's like all of a sudden anatomy was taking me 3 hours a week and now it's going to take me 8 hours this week. Just that's not. It's a pretty consistent class in the level of homework that's given. So the homework that is under week 1, that's what you are doing this week. So everything that's under week 1, this is all due next Thursday by midnight. Any questions on that and how that works? There was a couple years ago that I realized I needed to start explaining how the syllabus worked and not just assume that people knew how a syllabus worked, because there were some people that had never used a syllabus before, and then it'd be like 3 weeks into the class and I'd be like, why aren't you doing your homework? They'd be like, where do I find it? And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I probably should just explain that, even though it seems like something that should be understood. But for people who this is the first time they've ever taken a class, some people don't know how the syllabus works, so better to be too thorough than not enough. Okay, so then let's move on to the next paper, which is the disease journal assignment. This is going to be an ongoing assignment for the entire year. One of the things that I do find fascinating about human anatomy and physiology is pathology, which is disease. Which is unfortunate. Like, I think disease is so cool. I mean, I don't like the suffering that it brings. I don't like all of that, but I do think it's fascinating. Like, it's one thing to know how the body should be functioning properly, and then there's like hundreds of thousands of ways it can not function properly. And it is really, really very interesting. Anyone who was in my anatomy class last year, we pretty much started tracking everything with the coronavirus like first week of January, like before it was even on the radar in the US. And I was just like, there's this many cases and this, and what about this? And everyone was like, oh my, and then it became a thing. And I was like, see, it became a thing. Not that I'm glad that it became a thing, because I'm not, but we were like tracking, and I was like reading articles, and I was fascinated by all of it. So, so this is because we don't get to go into a lot of pathology necessarily, and the text doesn't go into a lot of it. We will go into some things in class, in lecture time, but this is a way for you to, every time we learn about a new organ system, look at one disease that affects that organ system and kind of see how they diagnose it, how they treat it, what's going wrong with that organ system, etc. So you'll have, I think there's 11 organ systems. I think you'll have like 12 or 13 of these by the end of the year that you'll have written up. And then on week 33, you'll give a short presentation about one of the diseases that you researched. So it's a pretty simple presentation because you've done most of the work already. You'll go back and you'll pick one of the diseases that you've already done and then put a short presentation together. And more details on that when we get closer, but that's like May, so we're a ways away from that right now. I have recommendations in the syllabus every time that one is assigned of what diseases you can do, but feel free to pick another one. You don't have to just do the diseases that I have recommended. I more so just give those to you because I know that those are diseases that affect that system, but if you know of another one, like you have a family member that has this or whatever, just send me an email and be like, hey, is this okay? I'll most likely say yes. Unless if the only time I would say no is if I know that, oh, you should do that for this system instead. Because although there might be symptoms in this system, it actually more so affects the nervous system. So hold off on that until we do the nervous system type deal. So what is it that you're going to need to do for the disease journals? You're going to have to give the following information. And you actually can write it. You can write it more bulleted. Like it doesn't have to be like written in a paper or research paper fashion. You actually can go through and use these bullets as outline and just kind of write it out in that way. Or you can write it out like a paper. I've had people do both. You're going to do the name of the disease, what it is. This is also key. You're only writing one. You're only writing one per time that it says to write it. Because I'll have like 5 diseases listed and you're choosing one. Because I've had people who've done it for all of them, and I'm like, I mean, you can, but I'm only grading one of them. And they'll be like, and I'm just like, you didn't listen. Although now you know more. So you only have to choose one disease every time that it's assigned. There'll be multiple suggestions, but you only have to choose one. So you'll name the disease, and then you will answer some questions about what it is. So what systems does it affect? Because a lot of diseases will affect multiple systems. So diabetes, for instance, that would fall under an endocrine disorder, but it's going to affect your nervous system. It's going to affect your circulatory system. It's going to affect different systems in your body other than just your endocrine system. There's some diseases that are like solely focus on one system. So like Crohn's, for instance, that's going to be mostly a digestive system disorder. But then there's others that affect multiple systems. So you'll have to look into what systems it affects, what is the problem, what's not functioning as it should. So in the case of diabetes, the pancreas is either not producing insulin or it's not producing enough insulin. Well, it's not producing it at all, depending on the type of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, it's not producing it at all. What causes the disease? So what is the cause for the disease? Sometimes it's genetic. Sometimes it's environmental. Sometimes it's a mutation that occurs in the body, like in the case of different types of cancers. So there's different causes for diseases. What's the history of the disease? Some diseases have really short histories. For instance, COVID-19, the history started in November or whatever. Like that was the start of the history for this disease. However, there are diseases that are similar to it that go back further, but that would be like the beginning point because it's novel. Something like hyperthyroidism, having too fast of a thyroid, that's like going to go back to as long as they keep records. Like it's going to be a really, really old disease. So it's going to have a really long history. So some diseases are relatively recent. Some diseases have a really long history. And some diseases just aren't researched well enough to really know when they started to crop up. Signs and symptoms. So signs and symptoms are different. Okay, signs is objective and symptoms are subjective. So signs are something that is an observable trait that you can look at and know that someone has it without them like telling you anything about it. Like I can see a rash. I can take your temperature. I can take your blood pressure. I can take your heart rate. I can take all these things. I can see if your colon has polyps in it. Like those are things that can be observed and are objective. So they're going to be the same for every person who has the disease, or for most people who have the disease. Symptoms, on the other hand, are subjective. They kind of are like, different people have different pain tolerances. So one person that says, I'm so nauseous, another person might be like, huh? Like, or, oh, my head hurts so bad. Another person might be like, it's a tickle. You know, like, we have different pain tolerances. So that's a little subjective. So things like nausea, headaches, even muscle aches, you know, are all things that we can try to describe to someone and be like, on a scale of 1 to 10, but still, you can't use the same scale for every person. Like, we try to do our best, but there's a certain level of subjectivity there. Diagnosis. How do doctors know you have it? Do they have to run a blood test? Do they need an MRI? Do they need a CAT scan? Like, what are the ultrasound? What are the different ways in which they're going to, a biopsy, are they going to use to diagnose you? A scope, etc. And then treatment, if there is a treatment. Some diseases don't have a treatment, you're just managing symptoms. Or I should say, managing symptoms would be a treatment. Some diseases don't have a cure. You're just managing symptoms. Like my aunt has Parkinson's. There's no cure for Parkinson's. They're managing her symptoms. They give her medications to manage her symptoms of the disease. Other things can have a cure. Some cancers you can get rid of with chemotherapy, radiation, certain types of other pharmaceuticals. Some cancers are more chronic and you can't get rid of them, but you can slow the growth so that you extend a person's life. So what is the treatment? Prevention. Are there ways that you can prevent it? Things like heart disease and lung disease and liver disease and kidney disease. A lot of them can be prevented by lifestyle choice. Some things factor in our genetic. Some people have high cholesterol and it boils down to bad genes. They can be healthy, they can be runners, and they do everything, and they still have higher cholesterol than somebody who does none of those things but doesn't have the genetics working against them. So there are some genetics that are involved with certain things, but there are a lot of diseases that are preventable from lifestyle factors. So is there a way you can prevent it? And who's at risk? There's certain diseases that affect women more than men, affect the elderly more than the young, affect the young more than the middle-aged, etc. So who is at higher risk? Ethnicity, race, that also can play a factor into different diseases and how they affect different people. Prevalence, what is the percentage of the number of population that suffers from it, and is it growing or decreasing? So is this something that is growing in prevalence or shrinking? Something like polio is shrinking. Okay. Something like heart disease in the United States is increasing. So is it decreasing or increasing in prevalence? And then at least two sources, whatever those sources may be. Mayo Clinic, WebMD, certain things, the CDC. Those are all pretty good sources. John Hopkins for looking for content. And then certain diseases will have actually whole just websites and foundations dedicated just to them where you can find more information. What are some questions you have about that? Anyone? Nope. What time does this class get done?
3:20, I think. Wait, no, it doesn't.
1:45?
1:45.
Okay, good. Just like pacing myself and trying to... I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay, we're going to fill out your notes now, so if you want to grab those out. This is a really excellent textbook. I've taken anatomy and physiology in college. The class that I took followed the same kind of structure as this class did, or this textbook does. This class is going to lay a really good foundation if you do go on to pursue anything in the health sciences or veterinary sciences. That's also key. So if you're doing veterinary work, even vet tech, this is going to still come in handy because there is crossover in physiology and anatomy, because a lot of the animals you're going to be working with are mammals. Now, some of the cold-blooded ones, obviously there's some different stuff going on there, but still structurally, bone structure, muscle structure, that kind of stuff, is still, there's going to be some crossover. And then when I say health sciences, even like radiology, sonography, so ultrasound, not just like nurse, doctor, physician assistant, but we're talking chiropractor, even if you're going to dental hygiene or dental assisting or like optometry, like you're going to be required in any of those programs to take an anatomy and physiology class. So this is laying a really good foundation for any of those future career choices. And if you don't pursue any of those things, it's still beneficial to know what's going on inside of you. Like, there's still that benefit of like, it's just useful information because it helps inform lifestyle choices. It helps just inform, even as things go wrong or sickness happens in your family or in your life in the future. Hopefully not, but you know, we live in a broken, fallen world, so you'll just understand all that stuff better. So there's that benefit as well. This class is going to focus more on physiology, so how things happen in your body. It also does focus on anatomy, like where the things are found, but your college course, if you do take it, will definitely dive deeper into things. Like you're going to learn some bones, not all the bones. You're going to learn some muscles, not all the muscles. We're not going to learn blood vessels, and we're not going to learn nerves, which are things that you would learn. But what it's going to allow you to do is you're going to have that base so that you can focus more on the stuff you didn't learn and have the stuff that you did learn just be review, if that makes sense. So that's how I see this class being a huge benefit to any future study that you'll do. So why do we call it anatomy and physiology? Because the two are a little bit different from each other. Anatomy is going to study structure. So anything that's bold in the PowerPoint, those are the things you should be writing down, which you'll notice that the words that aren't in bold are already going to be written for you. So anatomy is the study of structure. So it's the study of structure of body parts and their relationship to each other. Another way that you could say is that it's a study of form. So it's going to be your bones. It's going to be your muscles. It's going to be what are the layers of the skin? What are the things located in the skin? What are the joints of the skull? What are the different names of the teeth? What is the different regions of a tooth? Those are all going to be anatomy things. Physiology is the study of how the body functions. And a lot of times I'll abbreviate it f of x, which should look familiar from math. It's a function. So a lot of times that'll just be how it's abbreviated in your notes, and then that's kind of focusing in on the functionality of something. So that's going to be, how does your skin create itself? How does it heal? How does a bone grow? How does a muscle contract? How does a nerve send a signal? Those are all going to be physiological questions. Now, anatomy, there are kind of two broad categories, I would say. There's the macroscopic or gross anatomy, things that you can see with your eyes. And some examples of that would be systemic anatomy or comparative anatomy. Systemic anatomy is going to be the anatomy of the organ systems, how you group those organs together, how they share function, how their function's related, how it kind of builds on each other. Comparative anatomy is going to be looking at different types of organisms, so like chickens and cows, and what's alike and what's different. A person and a dog, like what's alike and what's different. Because I know that this is how it works in a person. Is it similar to how it works in a dog? Those types of things. Microscopic anatomy is going to be the study of microscopic structures. So it's kind of self-defining there. So things that you need a microscope to see. So at the cellular level and at the tissue level, histology is actually the study of tissues. So the ways in which the hierarchy of an organism's organization goes, tissues and cells are pretty much the only things that would fall under microscopic anatomy, because you can see organs and you can see whole systems and you can see the whole organism. So now let's look at what are the levels of structural organization. I'm just kind of waiting to see pencils stop moving. This is like the filler time. So we start, I should actually have inverted this. So we start at the chemical level. We are carbon-based. So behind chemical level, you can write carbon-based. We have other elements in us. We actually have a lot of elements in us. We probably have most of the elements in us. And because we have phosphorus and nitrogen and hydrogen and oxygen, and there's a little bit of gold in there actually, and copper, and unfortunately probably some arsenic and mercury because of environmental exposure. And there's lots of different elements that are inside of us, but all life on Earth is carbon-based. Carbon is the backbone. Then all of those different chemicals are organized in such a way because of our DNA. So they're organized in a specific way to form functioning cells. And we are made of animal cells, which differentiate from plant cells, which differentiate from bacterial cells. Now, not every cell in our body is identical to other cells. There are variations of the animal cell. A neuron is going to be different than a muscle cell, which is going to be different than a skin cell, but there are certain components that they're all going to have in common with variations on those components. Then we're going to have groups of cells together, which are going to specialize for a particular function, and we call those tissues. And there's actually only 4 types of tissues in the human body. When I learned that, I was like, what? Or actually, I should say there's 4 categories. That's a better way to say it. I was thinking there probably was dozens, which there are dozens of different tissues, but they fall into only 4 categories. And I was like, wow, that seems not like a lot. But as we learn about them, we'll see how they actually fall into these categories. So there's muscular tissue, any of the muscles in our body. So our skeletal muscles, which are the ones that we typically think of when we think of muscles, they're the ones that give us strength and allow us to stand and sit upright. They move us from place to place. But we also have muscle in our heart, and then we also have muscle in our blood vessels and digestive tract, known as smooth muscle, which causes things to be able to move through it. And we have nervous tissue, which mostly is what our brain is composed of, as well as our nerves. And then there's connective tissue, which does what it says. It connects things, so it connects our bones to our muscles to our bones to our other bones, but it also helps cushion and support. So cartilage is also considered a connective tissue because it gives support and structure and it cushions things. And then there's some really abstract connective tissues, which we'll get to, that I think that they just didn't know where else to stick them, so they put them under that category. And then we have epithelial tissue, and epithelial tissues act as linings. So our skin is an epithelial tissue. All of the surface of the inside of our mouth is epithelial tissue. All of our organs on the outside have epithelial tissue around them. The insides of like our blood vessels and the outsides have epithelial tissue. So the lining of anything and everything is made up of epithelial tissue. Then we get groups of tissues which form organs. And it's specialized for a particular function. So groups of connective and epithelial tissue and muscular tissue, they group together to form your small intestine, which function is to break down and absorb nutrients and get them into your bloodstream. So organs at their basic level are made up of tissues, but it's specialized for a particular function. And then we get the organ systems, and then the organism. So there's 11 organ systems, and I'm going to see how well we can do at listing them before I go to the next slide. So there's 11 of them. Somebody name one. Isaiah. Nervous system. Katie. Circulatory system. Respiratory system. Skeletal system. Muscular system. Anyone else? Got 5. Half-ish. Digestive. Now we're getting down to the harder ones. Reproductive. Yep, have to be able to reproduce. Okay, so I'm trying to think of which ones we didn't say. Excretory or urinary. It's called both. Lymphatic, which is also often referred to as the immune system, but it has a few more functions, so it's called the lymphatic system. Integumentary, which is our skin. And then endocrine, which is all of our hormones. So muscular system is going to be responsible for us being able to move from place to place. Skeletal system, also the muscular system is what produces most of our body heat. Our muscles contracting produces heat, which is why when you're cold, you shiver, because it produces body heat. Skeletal system is going to give us support. Also, it stores minerals. So we need calcium in our body, not just for our bones, but for other functions. So it stores that. Our nervous system is what allows us to sense and respond to the environment. Also allows us to store information and learn things. That's like, oh my goodness. That's just crazy. I still can't. It still is just so bizarre to me that we can file information away in cells. Like, how does that even work? Like, how do you recall something by just having different regions of your brain, like, light up? Like, it's not like it's written down and, like, stored. Like, it's just crazy. And it's amazing. And it's like scientists still, we can't explain the how. You know? Like, they can say what happens. Like, oh, well, you make these networks between regions of your brain, and then they get solidified, and then they light up, and that brings to mind. But how? Like, how is it actually getting stored? Like, there's